There we go.
Amen.
Shall we sing Come On in the Room again?
I don't know. That was great, right? That was great. We got to do it again.
Come on in the room.
Hey, hey, come on in the room.
There we go. We did.
Jesus is my doctor.
And he writes all my prescriptions.
Prescription. Yes. Yes. Oh, well, come on in the room. Welcome, everybody, to Octave Opulence Live Chats. I'm your host, Justin Pinkney, Creative Director of Octave Opulence LLC. My goal with this series is to bring influential and inspiring artists whose stories I believe will impact their creatives to find their unique voice and use it to tell their stories, while pushing past the obstacles of fear and self-doubt. Today, I have a special guest joining me from Nashville, Tennessee. He's truly an inspiration. He's been singing ever since he was 2 years old. Did I get that right? 2 years old.
Two? Yeah. It's
My.
either 2 or 3. Yeah.
And grew up to become an award-winning singer, songwriter, producer, poet, speaker, historian, whose career spans nearly 30 years. His work has been featured in a number of national media platforms, from NPR to Huffington Post to Color Lines magazine. He hosted Out the Box with Tim Dillinger for 3 seasons and interviewed a range of cultural icons, including Nikki Giovanni, Jimmy Scott, and Dorothy Norwood. Known as the Pentecostal humanist, my God. He has released 5 albums and 2 books. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Africana Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies from the State University of New York, University at Albany. And he is a proud graduate school dropout.
For real.
Love it. He hosts a monthly live series, Have You Ever Heard?, which revisits lesser-known albums by artists from the worlds of gospel, soul, contemporary Christian, and women's music. He also writes weekly features for Substack, a mailing list called God's Music Is My Life. He's also a partner with Imagination Fury Arts, which is an alternative media partnership of artists, scholars, and publishing specialists. And he has a podcast on Acre called Outlaws Evidence of the Unseen. Welcome, Tim Dillinger. How are you today?
I'm good. It's good to be with you.
I'm so happy to have you here today. This is going to be an electrifying conversation. I feel it. This one has been anointed and appointed.
Live wires.
So before we kind of get into some questions, I want to talk about how we met.
Yeah.
I want to say roughly 2012, 2013. And I say that because you were, at the time, getting ready to release the Baton 1985.
That's right. That's right.
And I actually found you first on YouTube. You had a channel at the time with a lot of great rare footage of like Bobby Jones gospel, and
Yep.
I think maybe even Saturday Night Sings and all the
Yeah.
gospel programs from way back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who is this guy? And I went into your actual YouTube profile where you could see like links, and I saw your Twitter, and I started to follow you on Twitter.
That's right.
And
Wow.
yeah, and we, had some conversations surrounding sexuality and the church and dogma and finding one's truth and living in that truth. And at that time, I was dealing with a serious struggle with my truth, and I consider myself a late bloomer. So around that time, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and still really dealing with kind of laying down the burdens that I took on from other people's belief systems that were kind of thrown at me as truth, and realizing that I'm not getting any younger. I need to actually figure this thing out and live the for real truth about Justin. So
Mhm.
we had some really candid conversations, and you
Did.
told me about your journey. And I remember one time, this and at this point it's 2014. I was still, playing in churches and stuff like that. And this particular Sunday, a church that I was playing for, the preacher was just going ham on, like, homosexuality is a sin and blah 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 blah. You're going to hell and this and that and the other. And I'm like, okay, I'm just here to get a check. I'm just here to get a check. I'm just here to get a check.
Yeah.
But after the service, it's like those words like triggered me in such a way that, I started dealing with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought about the conversations we had been having, and I'm like, let me reach out. Let me reach out. And you talked me off the ledge. And it was between you and another individual by the name of Michael Bryant. He's a great guy. He's a vocal coach with a company called A Approach. Shout out to Michael Bryant and Eric Arsenal and all the great folks over there. But I really felt safe reaching out to the two of you because of the parallels in our stories.
Yes.
A lot of times when you talk to people, they say you need to just accept yourself, F religion or whatever the case may be. But it's a little deeper than that, because
Totally.
when you're in the church like we were, it really becomes a part of your identity.
It's your community.
It's your community. It's like your safe space, but then there's some aspects of it that's not safe because
Exactly.
you can't bring all of you to the table.
Right.
So, Tim, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to kind of find safety in you and our friendship. And because of that, I live to see today. I live to see my late 30s. So
Wow.
thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
And this is the first time I've ever said that. So I'm saying that in public.
Wow. Wow.
On a public forum. So thank you.
Well, thank you really because you didn't have to show yourself. You didn't have to tell me anything. You didn't have to reveal yourself. And so to me, it's just reciprocal when someone shares the deepest parts of who they are with you. The least somebody can do is be there and listen in response to that. And it's the process of, I don't even want to call it coming out, because it's a process of self-acceptance.
Yes. Yes.
It's multi-layered, and it takes years and sometimes forever. And some people are able to just skate right through it and just be okay. And other people have many, many unravelings of the onion to get to that core.
So true.
And so I'm just thrilled that you're, where you are in the path. All of us. I mean, we're kind of miraculous in that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it speaks to the power of authenticity. You dare to show up as yourself. Even you were still working in the music industry and putting out music, but your music reflected a lot of your true self. Like, we're going to get into it. I don't want to push the push it forward too fast, but it was that authenticity that you brought that made me feel safe to have these conversations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
Let's get into it.
All right. I'm here.
So I want to start out with your background. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and any other background details you'd like to share with the folks?
I was born and raised in the Tampa Bay area
Okay.
in Florida, and grew up in a very stringent evangelical home. My grandfather was a pastor. My mother was kind of the scandal of the family because she divorced while she was pregnant with me.
Ooh.
And
God
that was
like divorce. That's what they say.
this was the mid 70s, and that was something particularly that Pentecostal women were supposed to have a lot of shame around. And my mother really didn't, because it was just a means of survival for her. It was like, okay, do I stay married and get killed, or do I get divorced and live. And so she did what was natural to her. And I think a lot of that maybe in me comes from that, maybe that moment and growing up in that, because I was then defined really as the, even though I don't really have stuff around uh, wedlock and all of that stuff. I don't really care about it, but
Yeah.
people's perceptions. I mean, I remember being called a bastard child, in the church as I was growing up. Like
Wow.
those are some of my earliest memories are of people in the church really using that as a weapon against me, um, just
And
because
th-
they
and
could.
they're saying this to a child.
Yeah, I was. I mean, if it was my earliest memories, I was had to be 3 or 4 because I remember things that far back. Um, and so that was really my introduction to that world and what it was. And I'm, in a sense, I'm really grateful for that now because there was never really a moment I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
And so I was
Wow.
growing up in it, but did not feel a part of it. And so I spent all of those early years really um, not afraid of it, but also not accepting it. So we've just been Ray and I've been rewatching the old Thief in the Night, Distant Thunder, like Rapture movies, and I would have like night terrors at night because they scared
Yes.
me to death. And so I was like running through the house to see if my family was still there in the middle of the night. Like it's not normal for a 4 or 5 year old. That is not a normal thing for kids to be experiencing. And so, but that
But the
was my
fear is
norm.
real.
Yeah. And so that was really my introduction to Christianity, was through that kind of lens. Okay, I'm a bastard. I'm probably, and I love that some part of me always knew that if there was a rapture, I was going to be left. Like that's why I was running through the house.
Mm.
And so to think about it now, it's kind of funny because it's like I never, whether I knew it or not, I wasn't buying into it.
Yeah.
And but when I was 2 or 3, I started singing, and I loved music. I heard the Rambos, and that was really my introduction to um, music that I loved. It was the Rambos, and my mother says that when I was in the crib, and when she was pregnant with me, and then in the crib, it was Andre Crouch and the Disciples.
Yes.
And so those were
Sing
really
and
my
sing.
beginnings musically, and I just wanted to sing all the time because I was good at it. People told me I was good at it. When I got in school, it was what made me comfortable because it was my calling card. I didn't make friends easily. I was,
Mm.
an effeminate little boy. And so when I sang, people forgot all of that
Wow.
and liked me. And so I sang as much as I could so that they leave me alone, in other ways. If I could just remind them that I could sing really well, um, I'd be safe. And so music was that for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's amazing that something that you enjoyed doing was sort of your safety, your
Yeah.
protector, your protection. For those who don't know the Rambos or Andre Crouch, could you tell the people a little bit about them? I don't have a necessarily a gospel crowd. I got a lot, but not everyone is.
Well, it's interesting. Well, yeah. So the Rambos were what they call a Southern gospel group,
Okay.
meaning they were more of they were known as having more of a country flavor. They had the most incredible harmony to this day that I've ever heard. Just the greatest harmony in the world. But they were a little different because they were transgressing all the racial stuff that evangelicals had, and so. Uh, in the late 60s, Dottie did a record with Jonathan Greer's Pentecostal Tabernacle Church of God in Christ
Hmm.
choir here in
Wow.
Nashville and won a
Yeah.
Grammy. She was the winner of the first Best Soul Gospel Performance Grammy. And so I didn't know that, of course, at 3 or 4 years old, but that was the
Right.
sound I was drawn to, was the Rambos. And they were soulful and just the greatest lyrics ever, just incredible songwriting. I just wanted to go everywhere they wrote about. And Andre Crouch was, in a sense, similar in that he was really one of the first contemporary gospel artist to really break the color line and make his way in the largely white at that time contemporary Christian slash Jesus music. But he was true to what gospel was. He just also liked soul and funk and pop, and he put all those things together in an incredible gumbo. And
Yes.
yeah, and really just changed the world in so many ways. And so those were my two like early just heroes. I just really I worshipped at their altar because
Yeah.
they were just both amazing to me.
Indeed. Indeed. So, what were you singing at 2 and 3 years old? Do you have a memory of that, or is there a
Yeah,
recording?
my first song was Andre, "The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power." That was my
You
first
were
song.
you were singing about the blood at
Oh
two and
yeah,
three years
isn't it?
old.
And now of course
You
I go,
came
oh,
you
let's
you
unpack
came out the
that. But
womb. You came out the womb saved. Come
truly,
on.
truly. And the other,
Oh.
interestingly, was "We're Blessed," which was written by Margaret Durow, who had just a lot of early success in the Gospel Music Workshop of America. And I had, you have no
Mm.
idea. I heard Tammy Faye Baker sing it on Christian TV, and that's how I found it. But had no
Oh,
idea.
okay.
Margaret Durow was, she was the composer. And
Wow.
so there's all these connections you look back at and you go, wow, things were really um, I was getting messages early in my life, about my path.
Yes, your performance path, your historian path,
Yeah,
you know. And it was a great time because we didn't just listen to music the way we do now. We held a product in our hand. We had the album, we had the tape, whatever, and we were able to look to see who played the instruments, who produced
that's
it,
right.
where it was
That's right.
recorded, what tape truck was used, stuff like that. And I don't know if everyone did this, but I can say for myself, I love like reading the liner
Oh yeah.
notes and
Oh yeah.
seeing what who was a part of this recording. Was that the same for you?
Totally. I would build a little hut around myself with my records. I would stand them up around me like a box, and I would look at the liner notes. And that's how I knew it. Just as a child, I wanted to come to Nashville because they were on the back of so many of the records we had. And I thought, well, I want to go to Nashville. I want to go to Great Circle Road where the Benson Company is. And,
Yes.
you know, and live there because all the music is happening there. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I think that's one of the real things I hate about this model we have now, because it has, as you noted, really changed how people listen to music. Music doesn't make an impact on people anymore
Yeah.
because we were spending at that time, and you and I are close in age,
Hmm.
we were spending 6.98, 7.98 on a record at that time. And you didn't get 16 records at a time because we weren't rich like that. And so
Right.
I'd get
Right.
maybe two or three records a month, and that was what I listened to all the time. And so I got to live with those records, and they became pieces of a part of me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just some fleeting song I listened to for 2 days and then moved on to the next thing. No, I mean, we were living on a budget, so we paid 6.98 for that record. We're gonna play it out,
Play it
and so
out,
I think
clean, dust it off. Make sure there's no scratches.
put some
Make sure you
scratches
need.
in there. That's right, because we like that part. And so I think, I feel so fortunate that that's the era that we got because
Yeah. Yeah.
it really did plant the seeds for all of the interests that I have today in looking back at it and unpacking it and taking it apart, because it's just like my arm or my fingers, it's just a part of me.
Yes. Yes. And one thing I loved about that era, and I really grew up on the choirs, and
Hmm.
a lot of the recordings that we got growing up in gospel were live.
Right.
So it sounded like you were in church. You heard
Yes.
the buildings reverb. You heard the people hollering and shouting in the background. And I don't know. My early memories of music was that. And when I started to kind of like, because I couldn't listen to anything but gospel growing up. was when I would kind of like tiptoe, maybe to a relative's house, and they would be playing, some R&B, and it wasn't like, and I'm more of an '80s kid. Well, I'm more of a '90s kid than an '80s kid. So I was really young when the New Jack Swing sound was out, and like I'm like, oh man, like I don't like the way this sounds. Like it's not, and and I started out with drums, right? So I'm like, the drums are not hard enough, I
Yes.
the echo sounds fake, like my ear was attuned to like the live experience that you got on the gospel recording. So it was
Yes.
really weird. I was really strange in that way. I don't know how was your experience. Were
I
you were you
love
solely were you solely gospel at the beginning of your
Had to be. I had no
okay.
choice. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, that was forbidden. And my mother used to, um, when we were in the car, we played secular music. 'Cause we all my mother, my grandparents, and I, we all lived together.
Okay.
And so secular music could not darken the doors of the house. So here's my mother, 25, 26, 27 years old, like hiding our secular 8 tracks in the car. And so she had, we had stuff like the Bee Gees and Barry Manilow was just huge for me. The 70, 75 to 79 records, I
Mm-hmm.
lived for them.
Okay.
Um, I'm trying to think what else we had because Barry was so big and the Bee Gees. Um, but as I got a little bit older and, third grade, you start getting MTV in the world. So I would sneak and look at MTV because I wanted to know what was going on. I went to a Christian school. So I didn't even have
Oh
yeah, I
yeah.
didn't have anybody in my life really. I remember hearing the girls at school whispering about Madonna, and I wanted to know who she was because I heard them talking about her. But beyond that, like I just had no way to even find out about it at that juncture. But as I got, MTV and VH1 were wonderful because you could sneak in that little side bedroom. And I mean, that's how I heard Aretha Franklin for the first time, was on
Wow.
VH1. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're talking at this point
Four,
1981.
83,
Okay.
84,
Okay.
85. And if I saw it was had to be Freeway of Love, had to be. So it would have been
Yeah.
85.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. No, my intro to Aretha was actually the Amazing Grace album.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the best introduction you could ever get. Yeah,
Yeah, double album.
that's right.
Um, so tell us, what exactly is a Pentecostal humanist?
All right. So I'm going to try to not go all around the world with this. I'm going to try to answer.
Let,
So
let it flow. Let it. This is a flow space.
I started saying that because, um, and maybe it started, uh, I think I only started saying that once Ray and I were together. So it has to be sometime in the last decade.
Okay.
Um, but my last go around doing music in gospel circles, I had a near death experience, which is what the last record really centered around. And when I was in the hospital, I had this experience where a sound healer came to see me. This is not a faith healer from the church. This is somebody that's got singing bowls, and they go between the worlds. And they came and saw me in the hospital, and I had this whole experience um, while she was working on me, where I was basically given a choice by the spirits. Really, I had this whole experience in another dimension where they said, you've got to make some decisions about if you want to live or if you want to die, because you've been living in indecision. You've been, living in between. You've been, just getting through, but not really being thrilled about it. And that's why that's why you're here. That's why you're in the hospital, because you've got to choose. Do you want to live and do your work, or do you just want to come here? If you want to come here with us, that's fine too. But you have to make the decision.
Mm.
And so I made my decision. I came back. I made this record really about that whole experience.
Yeah.
And when I was on the road going into all these churches. I I hadn't realized how much the church had changed in the last decade because I hadn't been in it. I hadn't been around it. And
Oh my
so
God.
I was experiencing the real infiltration of the praise and worship pandemic. And
Yep.
so I was just like, what are these songs? What is this? What is all this? And nobody's feeling anything.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing this, but nobody's really feeling anything. And just I just felt so much sadness in the church. And the last church I did, and this was in 2013, um, we had sat through all those songs, all those songs. And I got up to
Gotcha.
sing, and I went down Old School Boulevard, and I was doing the old congregational songs. And this lady came up to me afterwards, and she said, and she was my age. I mean, and at that point, I was, in my early 40s. No, I was still in my late 30s. I was 30. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was 38, 39. She looked to be about my age at least. And she said, oh, I can't do any of this new stuff they're doing. She said, but that I understand. That's what I understand.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I watched what happened when we were in that space. And I don't mean like I did some great thing. I just mean when we could all meet there, when we met there, when we were able to put down all of the pretentiousness of the praise and worship stuff and sing these songs that were rooted in what we know to be true, not what we want to be true or what we want
Mm.
to experience. We
Mm-hmm.
were talking about what we knew because we've lived that
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
I just kept, through the years, I kept thinking about that experience and what it was about the little holiness church that in my teens I found myself in, the fire baptized holiness church, that I kept going back to, what it was about the women of New Life, the New Life
Mm-hmm.
singers who I love so much and have been such a part of my life. What it was that every time I was going through something transformational, that's what I was coming back to. And
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
helped me do. It was nothing outside of me. It was what that force that's in that music helped me move through, helped me navigate for myself because I still had to do it. And I realized that everything I ever experienced in church, every time we got happy, every time we, had breakthroughs, every time we had these incredible experiences, we created it.
Yep. Yep.
It wasn't something falling on us. It wasn't something happening to us. It was what happened when we were in agreement in that place that we are going to do something here today, right now. And we could really, I mean, the things that I experienced as a teenager in that church in my early 20s, I came to Nashville and stopped experiencing it because people were showing up here with very different intentions.
Mm.
And so I went through like an incredibly dry period because I couldn't find anybody I was in agreement with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was like, how do we create? And the times that I did, I had to work so hard to pull people with me. And so when I in 2013, when I had that experience and over like the next 2 years or so, I said, I'm definitely Pentecostal, that I'm holding to my Pentecostal roots, but I don't feel like I'm a Christian. I don't feel like that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I can really subscribe to whatever the church is today. That's not really me. But I am a Pentecostal. I know how to move energy. I know how to be in energy and move it with people. I know how to do that. But I also believe in what we do.
Yeah.
That's what I believe in. I believe in what, when we really make up our minds to do something, we do it. And I thought, well, I'm a humanist. I'm a humanist, so I'm a Pentecostal humanist. So that's how that really came about, and that's what it means in some really long circular explanation.
It makes so much sense, and we hear a lot. And I grew up, apostolic, so we're sort of cousins in that way.
Totally.
The only difference is, we in the apostolic church didn't believe in the Holy Trinity, right? But we still
Right.
shouted, danced, spoke in tongues,
Yes.
fought, fell out, hooped and hollered. It was an experience, and it's something that I definitely take with me as well, wherever I go, wherever I go.
Yeah.
I I want to ask you though. You started out in the evangelical movement, in the evangelical church,
Hmm.
and then you went to the Fire Baptized Holiness Church. How did that happen?
I really believe something in me, if I'm a humanist, then it had to be something in me that wanted that experience to get out. I always wanted to get out. And when I was um, 11 going on 12, I read an interview with Leslie Phillips, who was a CCM artist. And she basically told the Christian community in an interview they could basically kiss her ass and she was leaving and never, ever coming back. And I had never, that possibility had
Hmm.
never occurred to me that someone could leave.
Wow.
And when I read that interview, it
Once again,
changed
you're new.
my little 11-year-old heart because it
Uh-huh.
changed my life because I said, I can get out too. I'm going to get out like she did.
Wow.
And so something in me, I'm really clear, had some energy because I was a strange little kid. I'd been on Christian television for the first time singing when I was 7.
Mm.
I always, something in me always had to be singing out. And when I was 12, that really picked up for me. And the timing of that with seeing that interview was really interesting to me because at 12, I started uh, meeting people through places I would sing. We'd go sing on the beach and do outreach and, all kinds of stuff like that. And so I would meet people all the time. And my mother, thankfully, would take me when people would call her and say, "Can Tim come sing?" She'd take me. So I got a call to come to a one of the few really integrated churches we had in our area. Um, St. Petersburg, like many places, is was very segregated um, between the North and the South, which is basically white and black.
Mm.
And they were right on the border, this church. And they called and asked if I would come. And my mother took me. And the Fire Baptized Church, their choir was a guest at that service.
Okay.
And I sang and I did a Lynette Hawkins song called "Walking in the Light." And
Yes.
and uh, after I sang, this man came up to me, Brother Johnny Knowlton, who's no longer with us, and he
Hmm.
said, "Can I have your address? I want to invite you to come sing at our church." And I said, "Sure." And I gave him my address, and a couple of weeks later, I still have the letter. Um, he sent a letter asking if I could come. My mother took me, and when we parked the car, I swear to God, I got out of that car and I said, "This is where I'm supposed to be." I just knew it. We hadn't even gone in yet.
Wow.
And we went in the church that night, and it was a little tiny church, maybe held 150 people if you broke a fire code. And which we did regularly. And I knew at that point that's where I was supposed to be. And I started
Wow.
sneaking out of my grandparents' church and getting my older friends to pick me up. I would sing at their church on Sunday morning and run out the back door to my friend's car and they drop me off at New Covenant. And I started doing that until I was um 14 and we had a big showdown and I ended up there full time,
Wow.
and
Church
eventually,
hopping.
yeah, yeah. And it changed my life. It changed my life. That church changed my life
Wow.
in
Wow.
a really powerful way because, white evangelicalism and black Pentecostalism in many ways are very different, particularly back then,
Yeah.
very different things. And so I got like my own great crash course in critical race theory. And I mean, we had, the people in the church, we had former Panthers, we had,
Hmm.
people that were politically aware, and it transformed my life. in ways that are I do the work I do today because of that experience and because of
Wow.
the people at New Covenant.
The seed was sown.
Yeah. And
So
they're still in my life. I mean, they are still in my life to
that's
this day.
awesome. That's amazing. So were your grandparents were they leaders in the church,
My
or
grandfather was the pastor.
was the pastor?
Yeah, so it was like a slap in the face when I
Oh
left,
my God.
and
And
I was
you
the musical talent, and
Oh
yeah,
wow. And you won that fight. Like you at 11 years old.
14 by that time.
14.
By the
Okay.
time it
Okay.
all came to a
Okay.
showdown, I was 14.
Okay.
And my mother, thankfully, again, things had just worked out in such a really incredible way. My mother had gotten a job like an hour and a half away. And it timed out just in a really incredible way for me to end up eventually with one of the families at New Covenant. And that was, you know, how it all went. And I was in a program, so I was going to graduate early, and we knew that at that point.
Hmm.
Um, and so I got out much sooner than I thought I would. I mean, really, I was fully emancipated by the time I was 15.
So let me make sure I just understand what you just said. So you left your family's house at age 15
Ultimately, yeah,
and moved in with a black family
yeah,
from the fire baptized holiness church.
yeah. Mother Morgan. And
What?
I was in high school, and it caused all kinds of stuff. I mean, I
So
was in a
so
Christian school, and
so
so
y- you crossed the red line. You
I
crossed
did,
that gerryman. You went into the gerrymandered district,
I did.
and at this point, you're 15 years old. You know you've been on the other side of the tracks, the other side of the divide, and now you're over here as a 15-year-old. What was that experience for you? Not just from a religious and church standpoint, but community.
Oh,
What?
I saw racism for the first time in my life. Like we would go places, and I watched, my godmother, the people of the church. We go out to eat. We would get seated like we'd have to wait sometimes just for forever. They wouldn't seat us. The police in St. Petersburg were notorious. I mean, we had the riots in when were the riots? 96, 97, somewhere in there,
Mm,
over police killing. I mean, and it was that kind of thing had been building up um, for years. I mean, the police were just notorious for their violence. And so I got to be in the community, see I saw where the cops hid. I saw where they did, you know, all kinds of stuff in that area. I mean, it was just
wow.
my godmother said to me, she was like, if you're here with us, she said, they're never going to believe you're here with us. And she said, so be careful. If they pull you over, they will plant drugs in your car. I mean, that was one of the earliest conversations when I started driving
Wow.
because, she would usually send somebody with me because she just didn't ever believe that, you know, we weren't concerned about the people in the community. We were concerned about the police.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And so
sure.
it was a life-changing experience, and I'm so grateful for it because if I had just been left in my grandparents' evangelical church, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know who I would have become. I'd like to think I would have become who I am today in some way, but it's not probable, you know?
Yeah, given the probabilities.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it was an incredible heartbreaking in many ways because it shatters what you think you know about the world. You're looking at it and you can't deny it because you see it right in front of you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I don't, yeah, yeah. I am really grieved by the world today because I really see,
Likewise.
yeah,
Likewise.
I just reflect on that experience all the time. And it's been my whole path. I mean, I've seen it over and over and over and over through the years because this has remained my community.
Yeah.
This has remained who I've been in community with. And so um, to see it getting worse is really, I'm doing a lot of work around that right now because
Mm.
I didn't think this would be the world as I approached my 50s.
Yeah. Yeah. How about that? How about that? Yeah. Um, Something's got to change. Something's got to break. I mean, I personally don't have faith in humanity,
I don't either.
but
And I'm a humanist, so it's
yeah,
also devastating in that way.
that
Yeah.
part, that part. When the humanist doesn't have faith, I'm like, oh my god.
Well, because nothing is, I feel like when we were coming along, there were things in the world. I mean, there was art being generated. There was art, mainstream art being generated. I'm not even
Yes.
talking about like the kind of art you have to really search for. Music was really centered around helping people find consciousness.
Yeah.
And everything today that is hitting people in the face all day long, everything that comes through a major label record company, everything that comes through network television is reinforcing all of the worst of us and encouraging us to be our worst. I mean, driving is just terrifying for me because I feel like that's when you really see it
Oh my
in
goodness.
full throttle.
Yeah.
Everyone is violent, they're
Yeah.
aggressive, they are belligerent, they are, just waiting for an opportunity to just at you. And it's just, why? And it's because everybody's being incited to
Incited.
be.
The anger is put on Front Street, and it's glorified. It's, you know, like they put the batteries in the back of people who are
Yep.
already on the edge, and it's just, yeah, it's really
Yeah.
sad, really
Yeah.
sad. So as a Pentecostal humanist, do you still use the terms like Holy Ghost, sanctified, tongue talking?
No.
You don't use the term? Okay, okay.
No, not in when I'm being serious.
I got you. I got you.
I'll hear something and say Holy Ghost,
Uh-huh.
but no,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I just had an experience this week with, I was at uh, a closed recording with um, women that are that. I mean, they are just, what they create is incites that feeling, that emotion, and I experience it, and um, everybody experiences it in their own way. It's powerful,
Mhm.
and that's how I really think of it, as power.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
And I hope that everyone that is able to generate that kind of energy recognizes they are powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It is work that they bring.
Yeah.
It's, sometimes, in that environment you feel that you fall short personally, and you feel that that power is going to be stripped from you, or you're going to have to suffer some consequence. But no, it
Yeah.
remains.
I mean, my whole language, your question really is about language. And so, I mean, I feel like all of my language has
Yeah.
really changed. As somebody um, said something to me the other day about the way they talk about God. Um, and they said, she's always been good to me.
Ah.
And I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And I was like, but
Yeah.
I don't have, for me, and that's the wonderful part. We all have a different relationship with the language. And I'm like, I don't actually even think about it in a God sense. I feel spirit. I feel spirit. I know what spirit is. And that's
Yeah.
what we share. And for other
Yeah.
people, they share God, and that's okay too. Um, but I have kind of worked in my own way to just have my own language around it, I guess, which means I don't really talk about it out in the world a lot because uh, I almost feel like, am I proselytizing by, using my language my way? So I just kind of,
Just
you know,
live. Just live.
yeah,
So for those of you who are watching right now, whether you're watching us on the live or on the replay in the future, if you want to sow into this anointing, I've put the Cash App on the screen. It's on your screen. Feel free to sow a seed into the ministry.
that's right.
All right, now. So When did you start traveling to sing? At what age and where did you go?
Well, I started locally. I mean, my godmother had a group. And so when I was with her, I was just in the group. And so it was her and the young man that invited me to the church in the first place, and two other women, uh, Ann Beecham and Pat Dancel. And we went all over St. Petersburg, the Tampa Bay area. And then my godmother and I, at a certain point, she and I started going out, just us. And really through regionally. I don't want to say the state because we didn't do that, but we'd go to like our church conference, and this is all like high school, era. And so we'd go, to our conferences, and we opened for the Florida Mass Choir. We did
Wow.
like local TV stuff. Um, and so that was a series of things. And then the whole time was just in love with New Life on Bobby Jones Gospel. I was
Hmm.
just crazy about New Life because they were just the epitome of what we did at church. And you didn't see that on TV.
Yeah.
And so they really they were what brought me to Nashville. And it's the year, oh, the year is blurry. I always, because unfortunately, as you get older, dates start to leave you. And because I want to say we went the year I graduated from high school to my
Okay.
first explosion. And so I believe that was 93,
Okay.
because that's the year I graduated from high school. And it was my graduation present to myself because I started working at 14 as well. So I was like saving money to do something, but I didn't know what.
Yeah.
And when I graduated from high school, I thought, I want to go to the explosion. I want to go to the Bobby Jones explosion. So my godmother and one of her other adopted daughters, we flew to Nashville, stayed at the Doubletree Hotel, and went to the explosion. I got to see New Life, and Andre Crouch and did not know he was going to be there.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Wow.
yeah, Andre was just coming back, and so
Okay.
he came, and it was just like a gospel lover's wet dream. I mean, it was just the greatest thing in the world
Yeah.
because it was Andre, New Life, John Piquet, Vanessa Bell Armstrong.
Oh,
Andre brought Crystal Murden. I think I said Tata Vega already.
you didn't, but
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Very good.
Tata.
Yeah.
Um, um, uh, I'm trying to think who all was it, but those were like the biggest, all around the piano at one time. And I was just like,
Oh my God. Yeah, I can only imagine the energy in the room. Oh my
it
goodness.
was incredible. And
And
um,
you get to see it unedited. You get to see it unfiltered for TV. Like
yeah, they
I've
never
never.
showed the good stuff. They
Yeah,
never
I
showed
can.
the good stuff.
I know it. I know it.
That explosion, it was amazing. And that was so I tell that story to say that it was at that explosion that I met Beverly Crawford from New Life, which is how I really started getting out in the world, beyond the Tampa Bay area and our little region. We brought them that year. I met them at the explosion, called them. As soon as we got home, we booked them at New Covenant, our church, for a revival. They came that winter, and they heard me sing. And so that anytime they were in Florida, they would call me and say, "Hey, we're doing a revival in Gainesville, or we're doing a revival in uh, Tallahassee. And I would go and sing
Wow.
before she preached.
You
And
were on the call list. That's amazing. And you're
it was
at this point early 20s,
late
late
teens,
teens.
late
Oh, wow.
teens,
What an
just out of high school,
experience.
just
What an
out of high school.
experience. Wow, wow,
And I
wow.
wish I'd known what an experience it was at the time, because it was just, I think it was the only way I could get through it, is because it felt so surreal in many ways. And it was a dream. It was a dream come true for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a ball doing it, and I loved it. It just built, I mean, this week I just thought, wow, we've been friends for almost 30 years.
Mm.
And it really blew my mind.
So you're
And
still in
so
touch. You're still friends with Beverly Crawford and
this past week was my first time face to face seeing them in many, many years. But yeah, we're still in communication. And yeah, I mean, so it's such a, yeah, it was just kind of mind blowing. I felt old this week. I went, wow, like it's been almost 30 years.
It's hard
And
to believe the 90s were that long ago, but
I
yeah.
know. So, but that was what really wet my whistle, and those kinds of experiences really said to me what those experiences say to someone in their late teens, and that is, you should do this. It's
Hmm.
what I always wanted to do. I wanted to
Yeah.
sing. I was a songwriter. I was writing songs already, and that was really how my career started. Um, and I didn't even know it. So I went and took myself in the studio, made a little demo when I was in my early 20s. First time ever going in a studio, and
Now, is that I Will Stay?
that was I Will Stay. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. 96? What year
Yeah.
was that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was 3 years out of high school. I'm actually never thought about it that way until we're just now talking about it. Yeah. I was 3 years out of high school. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What did I think I was doing? And I had all these big ideas, and so I sent like 100 copies to all the labels because that's what you're supposed to do. And I got
Especially back then.
yeah, and I wish I'd kept. I had got a wonderful rejection letter from Malaco. That was
Malaco.
yeah. I got
Oh
a
my God.
rejection from Malaco. Um,
I actually just found them on IG like a few weeks ago. I'm like, oh my God, they're still around.
oh yeah, they're
They
doing it.
they
Malaco's like they're doing it.
So you got rejected by
I did,
Malaco.
and amongst many others. I mean, let me not single them out. I really, in my heart, I wanted that like Malaco imprint or Savoy imprint on my, cassette spine. That was
But
like,
at the same time, to even have your name in front of executives at these companies is huge. Whether it's a
yeah,
rejection notice
that's
or
right,
come sign, your name was in front of these executives.
that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing. You had the courage to say, "I'm going to send this work. I love it so much. I'm going to
yeah,
send this work to these companies."
yeah. I listen to it today and I go, yeah, you were 19. Yeah,
So are you gonna put it out on the streaming platforms?
no, maybe one day, maybe
Okay.
one day,
Okay.
maybe one day.
It's gonna stay in the vault,
It's
until.
sweet. It's a sweet little 6-song project.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
um, but what that did, and that it put me in touch with. Once I had done that, I ended up meeting another performer who had a independent label, and we were going to. It's kind of a story, but we were going to put it out through his label, and he started getting me booked on like programs and like I opened for the Williams sisters. If you had to reach way down, Jesus will pick you
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was awful. I was so awful. It was an awful experience just because it was bad. I was bad.
Okay.
And I got a manager during that time period, and he said, "Can I see the contract you signed with this label?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, he read it and he said, "This is a terrible contract.
Mm.
And I think it's worth you breaking the contract and sitting out for the term that it says you would sit out if you break it," which was a 3-year time frame. And he said, "Take those 3 years and get even better, get even better."
And there were
And
no penalties with breaking it. Like you
no,
weren't. Oh, good.
no.
Good. Good.
And so
Good.
what he did was he kept me working during that time period, and he kept me out. I did the Gospel Announcers Guild brunch. I did like really. I mean, I look back at it and I go, it really has only sunk in with me in recent years. The things that I got to do with no record, with
Wow.
nothing under my belt, and just great opportunities. And I did that. I did start writing better songs, and I did start getting a clearer idea of what I wanted to do musically. And I moved to Nashville in 2001.
So you're getting into at this point the album "Love Is on My Mind,"
Yeah.
which came out in 2004.
Yeah.
What's interesting about your body of work is, each album has sort of a different sound sonically, production wise, and I'm just going to run them down. I want to get into so many more things with you. I know our time is like we're really deep into the hour right now, but I Will Stay 1996. You had "Love Is on My Mind" in 2004. the Muse in
I
2006,
did.
and Gospel in 2011, an EP.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and
Yes. I'm
then
sorry.
the Baton 1985, which came out in 2013.
Yes.
So we don't really have enough time to delve into those projects, but I've got to say it's a prolific body of work. I was introduced to you, as I said before, during the Baton era, and I noticed the production work by the incomparable B Slade.
Yes.
Others know him as Tone, but my God, that track that he did with the James Cleveland sample.
Well, and that I have
Oh,
to say, uh, I met him really through the same kind of experience that um, you and I had, in a sense, because he had just done the really controversial BET interview. I don't know if you remember that when he
yes,
was on Lift Every Voice.
yes, oh
And so they
yes.
had run part one. And the day after part one ran, there was so much controversy, they were threatening to not air part two. He saw my coming out blog that I had done on MySpace. And I
Mhm.
still, to this day, I've never asked him how he happened upon it.
Wow.
And he saw my coming out blog, and I still have what he wrote me on in response to that blog publicly. It blew my mind. I was like, this is Tone. Like, this is Tone, whose music I've loved. And he sent me a private message and said, something to the effect of, I'd like to talk to you. And he sent me his number. And I'm sorry, we have a barking dog now. Welcome to
That's
our
all right.
house. Um, and we got on the phone, and as we were just talking through my experience coming out, his experience that had just happened with BET in this interview, and he said, well, I know you have a radio show, and it doesn't look like BET is going to air part two. I want to give it to you. I
Mm.
want to give you the interview. And that was how we connected. So fast forward, and we stayed in touch. That was in 2000, I
9 or
believe,
10 or something
the
like that.
beginning of 2008,
Eight,
actually.
eight. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
because this is before Lexi. This is pre Lexi. This is like just on the heels of the Naked Truth thing with him that had
Yeah.
happened. And so we just stayed in touch. We stayed in touch. I moved, long story short, after I came out, I moved to New York. I was living in New York. We stayed in contact. I had my health crisis in 2012, and he reached out to me. In fact, the day Whitney Houston died,
Oh, wow.
he and I talked, and he prayed for me on the phone because I was on bed rest that year for 5 months, and he prayed for me, and he said, when you're better, we're going to do music together.
Wow.
And I thought, that's
Let me
really
hurry up and get better.
well.
Let
I
me
thought,
take up my bed and walk. Cause
well, actually I didn't, because I thought that's really kind of him to say. Um, I didn't put any weight in it because I thought people
yeah,
say things when they know
yeah,
you're sick, and people say things when they, think they want to be helpful. And I didn't doubt his sincerity, but I think didn't want to get disappointed if it didn't happen.
yeah, yeah.
And I moved back to Nashville in May of that year. And maybe 3 weeks after I got back, um, he called me and he said, I've got your song. When can you get to LA? And I said, let me figure it out. It was like, I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. And he said, now I'm telling you, this is a James Cleveland sample, and you can't muck it up. And what he didn't know
No,
was that when I
indeed.
was sick, the big things I listened to were James Cleveland and Aretha Franklin.
Wow.
And he had no idea. He had no idea. So when he said it's a
Wow.
James Cleveland sample, I was like, oh yeah, we're on the same
Yeah,
wavelength.
you're
This has been
tapped
my
in.
healing music.
Yeah.
And I got there, And I had never heard any. I didn't hear it till I got there. I didn't have any time to prep. I didn't have any clue what I was going to write. And he played me that sample, and he had the hook. He knew what the hook was. And I pretty much wrote it sitting there in the studio.
Wow.
I went home that night and brushed it up.
It sounds
And
and that track. Oh my God, the Baton. The track sounds like you went to the other side and had some conversations.
it
Like,
was the experience I talked about in the very
yeah, I
beginning of
was
this
gonna
call.
say, I was thinking about that as you were talking about that experience. It's like that's the Baton.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Oh, y'all go check out that track. It's powerful. It is powerful. And we're at the top of the hour. I hope I can get you a cup for just a couple more minutes because
Of course.
I want to get into some of your recent projects. Now, are you completely just not recording music anymore?
I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to. I want to do that. I um I had dinner the other night with the girls from New Life and someone else that was there that had worked in the business for many years, and she came into the business as a singer. And she said, I just don't sing anymore. I just don't sing much anymore. It's
Mm,
very different for me. And she said, I've really accepted that the music was my entryway to get me to what I needed to do. And when she said it, I thought that's exactly what I felt and have never been able to say.
wow.
And I feel very much like that. And I would still very much love to continue making music, but in a very different, my relationship with it has changed so much, um, that I need to be able to do it with people who make me feel good, and so that I can enjoy the experience. Because I feel like everything about everything I've ever done commercially has been fraught because it was commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And so it took,
you're having to form fit and shape shift and become a part of a template, and it's just like
yeah.
yeah.
And so that's so to answer your question in a really kind of long way, yeah, like I'm not done, but I do need it to be a certain way for me to do it and with a certain set
Understandable.
of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and I don't, and I mean, to this day, if you go to my Spotify, I think I've got like 50 monthly listeners, which is a blessing because I haven't made a record in a decade.
Yeah.
And I
Many
have do know,
years.
and I do no active promoting of the fact that I've done music. And so that many people continue to play what I've done over the last, 20 years is a blessing to me, and I'm grateful for that. And so
Yes,
whatever
indeed.
I do next will be for those people.
And there are more. There are more for sure that need to hear your voice that haven't heard it yet. You know,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the recent work that you've been doing a lot more writing. You released a book, The Road Home to You: A Singer's Journey from Exile to Gospel, which was a very powerful work.
Thank you.
And your bio said that you had two books. What's the second book? I didn't.
I did a book in 20, and I'm sorry for the barking. There's
That's all right.
something's being delivered downstairs, which is
Let the
causing
babies
all the
do what they
ruckus.
do.
Um, I wrote a book in 2008. It was a collection of poetry, and I just need to get it reformed. I'm not ashamed of it. It's just a collection of poetry and lyrics, and I'd love for it to be back out in the world again. I just haven't formatted it for ebook format or redesigned it, but I'd love for it to be back out. I love the work
And
that I did.
how's the project going? I saw that you were also working on a book for the New York Community Choir, or about the New
I
York
am.
Community Choir.
I am. They were my thesis work in school,
Okay.
when I was in college. When I went back to college, in 2014, I started that work on their story and met the two surviving co-founders, Benny Diggs and the late Arthur Freeman, who has transitioned while we were doing our work.
Mm.
Um, but I got to have I mean, I've had 4.5, I think, great years with Arthur. recording his story and getting his story, and um, still working with his family on getting his music back out in the world again. In his passing, their story just grabbed me because they were a progressive choir. Um, they were from the spiritual church, which has a whole different set of norms, which are not the norms you and I grew up in and with. And so they were to meet a choir that was intentionally including gay and straight and bi and trans members, was an incredible discovery.
Revolutionary for the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to actually hear like the people that were in the choir talking about how, Benny intentionally was balancing who was in the choir because he wanted it to be diverse. I mean, that was forefront in 1970 is it's an amazing thing to learn. And Benny is still in an incredible mind. And so I started, they were the center of my thesis along with the Voices of East Harlem. And as I've been continuing to collect stories and interview people and really try to understand how I heard an incredibly progressive message in gospel music and so many other people didn't. I realized like their story is actually the center of my book, but it's not the only story in the book. And so what it ultimately is a counter narrative to whatever it is anybody has told you about the history of contemporary gospel. It is a story of the people that you don't ever hear about that were making up this incredible gospel and contemporary Christian underground. And they were actually what was driving what we saw in the forefront.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they were the people the artists were listening to.
I'm looking forward. So, do you have a release date for that book?
My goal is to finish my draft this year.
Okay.
I've done over 110 interviews for this book. I've been working on it. Ultimately, I've realized ever since I started writing in the 90s, out the box. I mean, I'm utilizing things I did in Out the Box because I was interviewing people that were a part of this and didn't know it. And so now I'm understanding this large web of the contemporary gospel and contemporary Christian underground. I mean, it's an amazing story, and it has always been progressive, and it is not what you see today.
Love it. Love it. Speaking of which, Out the Box, what did you learn from working with Nikki Giovanni?
Oh, interviewing Nikki was a gift, and I've actually gotten to interview her a second time for this book on the New York Community Choir. Nikki was such an influence on me when I was in my late teens. I first found her books, of course, because of Tina Marie. And, another one of the secular artists I started stealing away to listen to. But Nikki's vision in particularly those records, Truth is on Its Way, Like a Ripple on a Pond, I realized so much of the way I see gospel is the same way she saw gospel. She understood that the sacred and the secular are not real divisions.
Right.
And so she was taking It's My House, and putting it with To My Father's House, and, telling her story of life. I would argue Nikki's probably in her own way, a Pentecostal humanist as well, because when you listen to Truth is on Its Way, that's what you're getting. Human experience with transcendence.
Yes.
And yeah. So Nikki was central for me really in cultivating this whole notion of the Pentecostal humanist. And I didn't even really put that together either. It's like you talk with people and you're I don't like to use the word collecting. That's kind of a bad word, but you're drawing from their
Mhm.
experiences,
Yeah.
what they're sharing with you. And, you're always juxtaposing that against what you know. And often that can change what you think you know about
Come on.
yourself.
Come on now. Yes.
Because,
Yes.
I said one of the worst things they ever told us in church was Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, because that may be very true, because Jesus, if we believe that, is all.
Uh-huh.
Jesus is all things. So he doesn't
Uh-huh.
need to change
Uh-huh.
because he is all. We are evolving in our experience. So we don't get the luxury of saying, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it, because
Right.
what we believe should continually be expanding
Come on now.
and
You
shifting
came to
and
preach
changing.
today. Come on now. You came to preach.
Sorry.
Once again, the collection plate is on your screen. The Cash App is posted. Feel free to sow into the ministry. How did God's music is my life come about?
It came about really because of my husband Ray. That was
Shout out to
Ray's.
Ray.
That was Ray's. Really,
Ray was getting things together for us before we went live, getting the microphone set up.
that's
Shout
right.
out to Ray.
Shout out to Ray.
Yes.
Um, I was struggling with how do I start. Blogging's done in that sense. Like, that's not a thing anymore. And he said, well, you've got a mailing list. Like, you've had a mailing list for years that you haven't used. Why don't you look at one of these subscription services and just see what the response is and how many of the email addresses are still good. And so I did a little first time introduction, but the idea behind it was God's Music is My Life came from a Benny Cummings and King's Temple Choir, their first record. And I thought it just summarized my mission. I mean, I believe all music is God's music. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not about it being about gospel music. It's because we also talk about like lesbian, feminist,
Yeah.
women's music.
Yeah.
Which in many ways is not even, in many senses, doesn't have many of the artists don't even have a spiritual base. And so, but it is about this idea of God as spirit. And I just feel like it's all connected. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
God's Music is My Life is about. But I've been sharing for the past 9 months features that are some of what you'll see in the book. I mean, many of the artists you're reading about, their expanded stories will be in the book. But I wanted to give people a taste of the stories and acknowledge these artists who get, most of the people I write about get no recognition
Mm.
for what they do. And to me, they're the definitive people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, and just moving the interview forward, I know I'm overstaying my welcome a little bit, but what has helped you to stay grounded and authentic in the midst? We talked about, how the industry, you know, tries to sort of form you and shape you into a template, and you spent many years in the industry as a performer.
Mhm.
How did you and how do you stay grounded and authentic in the midst of all that?
I think I stayed authentic when I was doing music. I don't know that I stayed grounded, which is why I had a complete physical crash.
Mm,
Um, I have never really known how to be anything other than me. And so I think that's, again, I think that's really back to what I said at the beginning of the interview about my mother and her experience. Um, and so I think that's how I stayed authentic, but I didn't stay grounded. And
mm,
I really, when I had my physical breakdown, I was after a year of not performing. And I realized I had a codependent relationship with performance. Um, I never actually had the thing a lot of people have. I hear people still to this day, I still hear people who say, I've got to get on stage.
yeah.
I've got to be performing. I've got to I've just got to. And thankfully, I never had that. I did it as a means of sharing what I did. sharing my songs. But I was actually relieved when I actually just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. Um,
Wow. Relieved.
I was relieved.
Wow.
I realized all I really miss, the only time I really miss singing is when I think about what we did at New Covenant. Sitting in my, I mean, we didn't even have to get up. We just sang from our seat.
Yep.
And
That down south church experience with the wooden floors,
yeah,
and it was spontaneous.
yep,
Nothing was planned. Oh yeah.
yep.
But
I
continue.
realized
Continue.
that's all I ever wanted. When I got down to the core of me, I realized that was all I ever wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
That I hated the pretense of performing. And so um, when I stopped, I actually felt like I became a little I became more authentic because it wasn't this piece of me I had to put a veneer on, that I had to dress up and get up and, and I saw a television thing I did when I was like 17 and I laughed because I said, I didn't smile one time. I didn't smile at all. And I loved that because I thought, at least I kept that much real.
Yeah.
You know,
You knew you weren't actually having a good time.
no,
Yeah.
and like I was in what I was doing. Like I was, I wasn't thinking, oh, you have to smile for the camera and you have to, I was just singing, trying to wring everything I could out of the song because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing though that's kept me grounded is that. And there's always been something that would say to me, no, don't do that. If you do that, you're going to regret it. And when I did it anyways, I usually did. And so that voice became a savior in many ways because when I would hear it say, okay, now you got to go. You got to go now. Get out of here. Stop doing this. I did. And and if I didn't, my body would start doing it for me. I mean, my last year of performance, I had throat infections after every show.
What?
Yeah. I had pharyngitis after every show in 2010. Every show I did in 2010, I got sick. I'd be in bed, couldn't talk, coughing, couldn't swallow every show. And it was like that voice was saying to me, you've got to stop.
So does something like that baffle the doctors? I mean, just from singing?
They thought well, when I say this, I don't want to be offensive when I say this because I don't mean it in a stigma-ish way, but I remember the doctor saying to me, do you have HIV? Are you, they thought I had like something else going on. And I was like, no. I mean, they tested me. No, I don't. And they didn't understand why it kept happening.
Wow.
And I knew because I know that's kind of just what my body does. I mean, it's kind of like a spiritual antenna. And it's just, if anything's out of alignment, my body's going to blow up. It's just
and really, our bodies are magnificent in that way. We, in a society like this, we aren't taught to listen to our bodies.
No.
But it's speaking to us every second of the day. And it's telling us that a lot of the stuff that we're doing is unnatural. It's unhealthy. It's breaking us down.
Yep.
So that lesson learned there to anyone watching this, listen to your body.
And I have not gotten pharyngitis since that.
Wow.
Even when I did the Baton, because the time was right. The time was right for me to be on the road and doing that. And I was in my body and I were in alignment with that. And so I went out, sang, I was a little nervous actually when I went back out because I thought, is this going to happen again? And it never did.
Wow.
And I'm clear that I was just in a situation that, my voice was saying, I will not be used in this way. I will not.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so those kinds of things are what kept me grounded.
That's amazing. This is my last and final question, I promise.
Okay.
What gets you through the hard times?
well, I've been coming through one. And so the thing that I said to Ray earlier this week, that the timing of being with New Life was so timely, because when we were, it took me back to when we were living in Massachusetts, and I realized again, it was one of those body, mind, soul experiences where I knew graduate school was not going to happen for me
Mm-hmm.
where we were. And Ray was having a really challenging job situation where we were, and we just felt like every day we just thought we're going to die. Like every day. It was
Mm.
that kind of dark
Wow.
night of the soul kind of experience. And I would sit in front of the television when we were home, and I would put on my New Life videos. And those songs were what carried me. And that sound is always what I go back to in the hard times. It's that
Mm.
sound. And
It's amazing. Yeah.
whether it's them, or whether it's James Cleveland, or whether it's um, old
Hawkins
videos, I
family.
Hawkins family videos I have of services from New Covenant. I will put them on, and I
Yes.
will sit with
Yes.
them and let them speak to me, because that's the sound of home.
Mm.
And so in the hard times, that's what I do. And on that level, I still tarry.
Oh,
Uh, you
come on
know,
now. Come on now.
yeah. I mean, that language, that part of the language remains real to me, because I
Mm.
understand, we always used to say you got to go through it to get to it.
Yep.
And that really is that I still subscribe to. And so that music is tarrying music. And,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
yeah,
My, my,
it's the
my, my.
music. It's not the preaching, it's the music.
It's the music. It's the
Yeah.
music. Before we go, can you tell us what projects we should be looking out for?
Well, Ray and I co-host Outlaws Evidence of the Unseen, which is a quasi bi-weekly, monthly, he just said, podcast. Um, that's a continual thing that's happening. I do bi-weekly newsletters at God's Music is My Life. The book is, for me, the next project that's coming, and that will probably see the light of day in 2023, hopefully, maybe. I really want to
2025.
find a publisher for it. I would like to not do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know it's a process, and we'll see what happens. But if you want to keep up with that, just come to my God's Music is My Life.substack.com and subscribe, and you'll stay informed on what's happening. But those are the big projects.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on my platform. It's been a blessing. Can I
Thank
use
you.
that term? It's a
Absolutely.
blessing to finally have a conversation with you here in the public spaces. I have your Instagram and your Twitter handle, so anyone watching this, please give Tim Dillinger a follow and keep up with his work. He's doing amazing work
Oh, thank
in
you.
the creative space, in the music space. He's a great historian, so
Wow.
please send him a follow, and you won't regret it. You will be inspired for sure.
Well, I am continually always just grateful for, and so and I don't mean this in a paternal way, because we're like brothers, but I'm so proud of you, and just your becoming. I mean, you just,
Thank you.
I feel like
Thank
so
you.
much has changed in the last 10 years. It's just been
Yes.
amazing. It's just been
Oh,
amazing to
yes.
see you do that, and be in your strength, and be in your power, and on your platform.
Much
Um,
appreciated.
so I'm just grateful for you, and who you are, and what you do
Thank you so much.
in the
Thank you.
world.
Means a lot to me. All right, Tim. I will let you go. You have a great evening and a great weekend, and we will be in touch.
All right, my friend.
Take
Keep the
care.
faith.
You too. Bye bye.